it says here, Zera Levi, Kulo Muvdal Avodat Mikdash. The seed of Levi entirely is set aside for serving the temple. By the Rambam saying it means also Kohanim. They're just a subgroup of Levi. One exception, I wanted to show this to you. I forgot to get the source nice and handy. A halal is not like this. A guy is chas v'shalom Kohen, his wife is previously divorced, so they have a happy marriage, but the Kohen's doing is a sin, and his own children are not Kohanim. They're called halalim. They're empty. You can say, okay, do they revert to being Levites? No, they're nothing. They're not Levites. They don't get Levitic privilege. They are descendants of the tribe, and I guess they get paternal inheritance. When this Kohen dies, his halal children will receive his physical property, and if he owned land in Eretz Yisrael, they will receive his land. But they are not Kohanim, and they do not halachically count as Levites. And we'll bring the source for that next time. It says God separated the tribe of Levi. You know, remember the Rav's Havdalah. There's another Havdalah. There's things what we say in Havdalah. There's other Havdalah, being Tamela Tahor, being Shevet Levi Lishar Yisrael, you know, right? Being Levim from Kohanim. There's a lot of Havdalot. So this is one of the examples. It's a positive commandment that the Levites be available for the service, that they be free. It says Pnuyim. Rob's going to say, yes, they are free. There's a lot of things that Levites mean people are separated from the rest of, the workings of the world. Remember at the end of Shemitah Yovel, he talks about that. As it says, Bein Ratzu, Bein Shelo Ratzu, whether they like it or not. The Levim are to be treated differently and kept separate. So it says that in Bamidbar also. Oh, I just remembered, we're not sharing this on the screen. So hold on, please, 1 second. You have a Levite who accepts these commandments, except for one. He says, I want what I have to do as a Levi, except that I don't want to have to work the temple gates. I don't want to have to guard the temple. Okay? Means that if he wants to work in the temple, he has to know that being a Levi has a lot of responsibilities. What we say already the Levim do, well, they have to provide a choir. Also, maybe instrumental. We saw that who plays the instruments. Yisraelim can play the instruments, but some things are dafka the Kohanim do, some things the Levim dafka do. And to open up the gates, but how many Levim do you actually need to open the gates? No, it means that they have to guard the gates, and that all-night guard. There's the honor guard which they perform, but also the actual making sure that Timeim and others do not enter. So that's a big deal. Levim have to be in charge of Har-Bayit. So they can't say, oh, I want this job, or I just want a piece of it, or I'm just here for the Meiser. Like all that Meiser, it's not like they're going to get tons of it, but like, I just want people to, I just want to be the honor of being the head of this mishmar of Levim. So that's a problem. We saw what's the service? How do the Levites serve in the temple? They have to guard the temple. And among them, there has to be ones who actually open the gates and to close the gates, right? But the main thing is they're in charge of the Temple Mount. It takes a lot to guard the Temple Mount. And among them also those who sing upon the sacrifice every day. That means a certain point during the service of the sacrifice, usually the time when they pour the wine, the libation, that's when they sing. He should serve there, administer in the name of the Lord his God, just like all his brethren, the Levites. What's the sheruth that is in God's name? It's the one they use their mouth for. Okay. Umathai omrim hashira. When do they sing the song? All obligatory burnt offerings and shalmei atzeret, the peace offerings that are offered on Shavuot. They're actually eaten. There's shlamim that are offered by the tzibur when the libation is poured on the altar. Okay, so God takes music with his drink, so to speak. These are voluntary offerings. Kayed Sam is Be'ach has nothing to do with the summer. You guys know about this. There's an extra temple fund. No, it's not even dessert. It's that, let's say it's a slow temple day. Well, I don't know. They say dessert like that. It means that you have to keep food on the table.
Yeah, so you have You have fats going, fats and limbs going.
Yeah, so it doesn't mean it has to be super busy. How long does it take to do a korban tamid, by the way? That's over the course of a few hours. And there's a tamid in the afternoon. So they're going to be, if it's a slow day, really, but a lot of people are being voluntary korbanos. So what do? Here's the other thing. We're going to pause for a second because, sorry about this. And sad things, but whatever. Okay, so they have to bring it during the Shira time. And Kaiser Mosaic we're saying is extra animals that they just had in order to keep the Quantum doing something. So there shouldn't be a lull. So that's the Kaitzim Mizbeach. So during this Kaitzim Mizbeach, don't forget, if it's a lamb they're bringing, every lamb has its meal offering, and every lamb has its wine offering. So you would have thought that because we're bringing an extra lamb just in the middle of the day, because we have to keep something going, and there is wine also offered on the altar with this lamb, perhaps the Levites should be singing a song at that time, at that point. Kamash Malon, they don't do that. Just a wine offering alone. So they do not have an offering about that. Why did the screen share end a second ago? I don't understand what's going on. It ended it twice for me. Okay. Levi onain mutar lavodul shorer. What's an onain? Also very appropriate for this current situation because we're waiting for two funerals now. An onain is basically the mourner, the close relative who's responsible for. Remember, the close relative is the one who's responsible for the burial. So they are in a state of aninut. They are not avelut. Avelut is post burial or post nothing to do. In the olden days, it used to be you handed over I guess you're going to send them the mace to Eretz Yisrael for burial. So what do they do? The the bereaved hand over basically the mace, and he gets on the boat, and then they start sitting shiva, even though the burial will be sometime later. Nowadays we have a Zoom hookup, so it's a good shiloh. At what point the people who put the nifter on the plane in on the LL plane in JFK are hooked up? They're looking on their phones with their brother who's on the airplane. He's a constant communication, or audio and visual, until the burial. So do you say that they start their shiva now at that point, or because they're still involved in this whole process, they will only start shiva once the burial is over? Good question. I've seen posts today, say both answers. There's no clear thing right now. So the onain is the person who's waiting for the burial, basically. So normally an onain, what does an onain not do? Mitzvahs. And onain doesn't do the positive commandments. It's not like a free for all. He doesn't do mitzvahs, so he can eat pork. No, he's still forbidden to do what anybody else is forbidden to do. He's just not expected to, I don't know, daven, put on tefillin, etc. Okay, but this Levi mutar lavod. Why? Because avamin is a regular onain is actually forbidden. Okay, a regular onain is forbidden. Like for example, who's it forbidden? Onain avshel kohen onain asur lavod b'veit hamikdash. Okay, the precedent, Nadav and Avihu precedent, a Kohen should not be serving an aninut. For a Levi, there's no such thing. Vein pochatim mishneim asar levim omdim al haduchan bechol yom. You have to have at least 12 Levim standing on that platform in the temple courtyard every single day. Lomar shiral korban, at least a choir of 12. Okay, you could have more, right?
Is there a significance to 12 over 10?
Yeah, good question. Well, you could have any more than that. Why was that the minimum number? I think there must be a. No, it's not clear. Don't forget you saw the other sheet that's down here, by the way, Tosfos, etc. About how is it singing or also klei shir included? How do you count it? I think there's a drasha that tells you it has to be 12. Okay, a drasha of Chazal that say dafka that number. How they derive it, I forget now, but it's a drasha there. It's not just a random number they got. The Torah doesn't say explicitly 12 Levim have to be singing at all points. Okay. By the way, it's very rare. What did they sing in Moshe Rabbeinu's time? It's never explicit until basically the times of David HaMelech that Leviim were the ones who were singing. Yeah, we saw this pasuk b'shirei b'shem Hashem Elokav. It's explicit in the Torah, Mifurash, that the Levim guard the temple, they carry the temple vessels, and they act as, whatever, what we just saw. But the fact that they sing is very unclear. By the way, what did they sing in the temple? It's another thing that's not clear. What did they sing in the temple? Various Tehillim, right? The Tehillim is basically the prayer book of the Levim. All the shirim that they say, Shir al-Levim, is taken from where? Tehillim, except for one, or two. The Shabbos they sing Az Yashir and Ha'azinu. Those are from the Torah. What did the Levim sing in Shiloh times before they composed the Tehillim? Well, yes, very good. I like that you said that. Also, the parts of Tehillim that predated David. Okay, Moses wrote some Tehillim. Just like Az Yashir and Ha'azinu are of Mosaic vintage, and also some of the Psalms are, right? So too, there were already Psalms in existence. They just hadn't compiled the entire book, but the Levim had what to sing. And you say that their own things because that's very good. In Divrei Yomim, it talks about David HaMelech, who's basically the main compiler, also one of the main authors of Tehillim, who were his associates. It says, Haman, Yedutun, Asaph, all these big shot Levim that he gathered in Jerusalem. Basically, David HaMelech found his place more with Levim than Kohanim. It says he put the Kohanim and Givon in charge of the Mishkan. They have to do exactly like Torah says. There's the Mishkan. That's the Mikdash, basically, like the Rambam says. The Kohanim B'nai Tzadok, that's their town, Givon. They let them do in the Mikdash what they want. I have the Ark of the Covenant. I'll just make my own Baba, an altar. We get to do things the way we want. The people who are ministering, singing off in Korban here in Jerusalem are the Levim. That says explicitly in Divrei Yomim, and it says David HaMelech composed with these Levim, and they're all aspiring prophets. So in the way Rambam describes it in Mor Nevuchim, these Levim were all that level just below prophecy. Talks about the people who were divinely inspired. It says Moses, before God spoke to him, the fact that he was so a hero, he just ran and did things the right way, like he knew to save people and all that, and he wanted to go see what's going on. That was the level of King David and Solomon and all these other composers of Tehillim, those who sought prophecy. How do you know that, let's say, David and Solomon, even Daniel, and the rest of the Nevi'im were not Nevi'im? Because their books were not included in the books of the Nevi'im. If David and Solomon actually crossed over that line, and now they're writing prophetic books, then their compositions would have been included where? In the Nevi'im, but they were not. So it's Ksuvim. It's, Kisvei HaKodesh, but not that level. This is explicit in the Mourning book. That's the way the Rambam has it. There are those who are like Rashi apparently felt that King David and Solomon were just as Navi as, there's different levels of Nevi'im still, but he counts them as, the 48. Maimonides does not. Yeah. So Eicha is not one of the things. Jeremiah, what he wrote his whole book. So he's a Navi, but he can also write Ketuvim. Moses is, of course, a Navi, but he also composed for Tehillim. Eov, if he indeed did write Eov, which also very questionable. Even though the Rambam says no one knows when Eov was, also the Rambam, it comes out that the Rambam basically chooses the latest authorship for Job. Yeah, that's what comes out also from the Rambam. Why? Because the Rambam says major philosophical arguments, the streams he's discussing, like the major Greek streams, right? Aristotle is in Eov. He's one of the major characters is patterned after Aristotle and Eov, right? Correct? Okay. So Rambam puts Aristotle into Eov and saying that Eov is basically a poetic discussion between all these streams that the Rambam discussed more in Nevuchim, correct? Josh, you've gotten to read this? That's the Rambam's Pshat in Eov. So the Rambam says, the Rambam even says, one of the speakers in Eov is basically a general Jewish, the way the Torah would say it, general Jewish experience. And the ultimate way that comes out at the end of Eov is the way I'm trying to tell you more in Nevuchim, which is a synthesis of all the others. So one of the main speakers in Eov is someone who's basically has Aristotle's words in his mouth. That's how the Rambam has it. So if you're including Aristotelian type of ideas in Eov, you're basically pushing it to early Second Temple times, which, by the way, is a day in Chazal. That would put it, Anshe Knesset Gedola. Just saying, the way the Rambam has it is that it must be that Eov is a later composition, late biblical, as opposed to Mosaic. But my point is, even if you have Nevi'im, they could still write things that get included in where? The Ksuvim. But Lehefich, if you're not a Navi, what you're writing will not be put into Nevi'im. It'll stay in Ksuvim, like David and Solomon. Anyways, so you see that this is what David was. David was aspiring to be like the Levium, and this is who he hung out with. And if you wonder, what did they sing in the Mishkan, in Nov and Givon and Shiloh, what they got from Moses and what they got, like you said, their own compositions. And eventually all of them are compiled. It could be that most of the Shir Shel Yom, the things that we know about, even though some, was it, Mizmor L'Asaf, okay, and Mizmor L'Vnei Korach. Bnei Korach were who? They were from Moses' time. So there were some Shir Shel Yoms obviously are from Moses' time. Asaf was a contemporary of David HaMelech. And David obviously was himself. So some of the things that we now have as Shir Shel Yom that they used in the temple for centuries, some were of Davidic time, and some predated David by many years. Perhaps many generations. Some perhaps were even used before they were solidified. Okay, we're going to see other things. There are things that are Seder was done in the temple from the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, and by the time of David HaMelech, they changed around, they established it in a different way. Just like also some other things were reestablished in Second Temple times. We're going to see Mishparot HaKuna, how the priestly groups were divided also, and their different duties changed in Second Temple times, even though they had been established even before the first temple was built. Read Divrei Yomim, it's very good. They have a lot of the technical details in Divrei Yomim are what we're learning here. So people skip that. Guys, okay? Okay, next. Which line are we up to over here? This is Shikar Shira Hi Avodatam. Okay, that's Bapeh. They say Venorim Shira El Bapeh Below Bekli. That's a cholik on Tosfos, by the way. They say you can read the notes on the bottom. There's Rashi has what to say on this also. He says the Kar Shira is with their mouths. Levites should be good singers. There's a joke in Uri Orbach, the late Jewish politician, I think, for the religious Zionist party, the guy with the mustache. He wrote poems about this. He says, kid thinks that this his friend in school is a Levi. He can't sing for his life. He'll probably be one of the Shoarim when they build the base of Mikdash. So there are people who are supposed to be playing the instruments, by the way. Who are playing the instruments according to strict Maimonidean reading of this? Israelites. Proper Israelites who are able to marry into the kahuna. Okay, fine. Next. There were others there who were playing musical instruments. Some of them happened to be Levites, and the rest some of them were Israelites, like we just said, they had proper yichus. They didn't have like blemishes in their lineage. When did the blemishes really happen in temple times? It says, Chazal of a Mishnaic tradition, that those Jews who Dafka came back for the Second Temple times were the ones who had worse yichus than the Jews who stayed in Bavel. The aristocrats stayed in Bavel. The Reish Galus himself, the Davidians, stayed in Bavel. And there was even some Kohanim who were, basically they made it to Yerushalayim and Zerubbabel, and later Ezra and Nehemiah had to tell them, we're very sorry, but we're not allowing you to serve in the temple. That's when the standard happens. You have to have a Megillat Yechusin. You have to have witnesses that you're a real Kohen Miyuchas. That started basically the Second Temple times. And there were a lot of people who were technically Kohanim they said, you might be a halal for whatever reason. We're disqualifying you from henceforth in the kahuna. And that's even Mishnaic times. You knew certain people are Kohanim, so they can't go near. They assume they're Kohanim to a certain extent, misafek, so they can't go near the dead. Yet we don't allow them to eat truma. We don't consider them full Kohanim. Okay, that was a thing that persisted for centuries. So these Yisraeli Muchasin are the types of Israelite families that the Kohanim felt comfortable, marrying into, that wouldn't cause them their own problems. Shein olal duchan elam yuchas. The only person who can go up on the stage, basically there in the temple courtyard, was someone who was a miyuchas. Ve'ein elu amishorin al pi hakelim olim luminyan shnemasar. Those people playing the instruments are not the minimum 12 who are singing the song, the tehillim. Uvameha hein minagnim. What are the instruments they play? They play bin valim. That's a type of string, usually harps. Okay, string instrument. The difference between the navel and the kinorot, which is another type of string instrument, basically the equivalent of our violin is. Did anybody here play music? You guys know music? How many strings are in a guitar or in a harp?
6.
An octave on a piano, how many strings does that have? In order to create a, well, 13. Very good. Wait, an octave, that means 8. No, but there's the 5 black keys in between the whites. Yeah. Oh, you have perfect pitch?
No.
Okay, so you start with the do. You get 3 whites and 2 blacks in the middle, and then there's a section of like 4 whites, right? 5, yeah, with 3 blacks in the middle. So an octave has 13 notes basically. But in a piano, for example, a piano is basically a string instrument. By the way, a hammer and string, right? A violin has just a few strings. A guitar is just a few strings. A harp, good harp, you've seen them, fancy places. A piano is a string instrument with how many strings it has? Well, 88. See, there's a few octaves in the piano. Okay, so that's the difference. Even then, they did not have pianos back then. Piano was a later invention. Okay, but they had string instruments, and already like the Greek mathematicians who were around at this time, they're basically coming up with the whole music theory and explaining. You keep having the lengths and stuff, and he came up with octaves. Yeah.
Fifth, but never go any worse than that.
So it's mentioned that, by the way, this is another piece of Bible. I love saying this one. David was a musical genius, right? That was what he aspired to, and he hung out with these Levim who knew music. It says God chose his son Solomon. It says his own mother. David had a few wives. They aspired to have children who would be fit to be king. Solomon's mother aspired to have a child who would fit to be a prophet. Prophecy is connected to music, composition, with lyrical, and also what's the tune thing? The melodic, yeah, lyrical and melodic. They have to go hand in hand with prophecy. So she wanted a child. Basically, David was many things. He was a warrior. He was a leader. The child who inherited his flair for inspired music was Solomon. That's why Solomon continues in his father's footsteps. What's the most important thing that we still have from Shlomo Melech's days, aside from the idea that there should be a temple on the Temple Mount? We don't have the temple, but what do we have from Solomon? 3 books of music, okay, that approach the Psalms in their quality and also their style, etc. The Mishlei itself is written style of the Tehillim, right? It's also one of the Sifrei Emet, so that's an important thing. So it says about Solomon, it says he was the wisest of all men. Yeah, he was given great wisdom to judge the people. But then in the later chapters, it says Solomon's wisdom was very great. And what does it say his wisdom was? He was greater than Haman and Asaph and Yedutun. It means like the wisdom of music and all the Bnei Kedem and the ones and the Egyptian musicians. And he had songs about nature and about the animals. When it says that Solomon was the wisest, his greatest wisdom was not that he could build a nuclear power plant in ancient Palestine. It meant that he was a musical genius. Okay, so whatever David had, the musical skill that he had, was inherited by the son. That's what it means. Okay, so they knew how to do these instruments. So this is string instrument. Chalilim are what? Flutes. Basically, this is what we call wind instrument, woodwind. Why? It's wind, wood? What's the difference? Because we're going to see the next one is chatzotzrot. Those are brass instrument, or as we say, they're basically made out of gold and silver. Really, if you want to make a good trombone or all the other brass instruments like a saxophone, right? How many other? It is a woodwind. Oh, because of the reed. Okay, because it looks like it's made out of metal. The point is, they had a specific commandment to make trumpets out of precious metals. Making most of these instruments out of precious metals is not the smartest thing. Okay, for those who know music, but you understand that they're using wind instruments. There's the kind that are generally made out of wood, and the kind that are made out of metal, and the tziltzal. The tziltzal is percussion, basically cymbals. What about other percussion? What about like skin percussion, drums, tupim? We don't see those, but perhaps you could add those. That's basically, these are the 5 categories they had: percussion, string, multiple string, and the woodwind and the brasses. Okay. Nevalim, you have to have at least 2 of those, but not more than 6. No less than 2 flutes, and no more than 12. No less than 2, no more than 12. You have to have at least 2 horns, okay, or trumpets, whatever it was. By the way, chatzot covers a lot of the different types of instruments that we know today. Even a saxophone, they would just say, "Oh, that's a trumpet or a horn," of a different shape. Okay, the theory is very similar, but also we have nowadays different what do you call those things? The different keys that they use the fingers with. When you use a flute or something like that, you cover the air holes, and when you play, let's say, once again, the saxophone and the trombone, there's also things you press, you close things with your fingers. I forget what those are called. I have not enough experience playing these things. I like the piano because that's what I have around the house. I like whistling, But yeah, piano is great also because you can mimic a lot of sounds with it. It has so many different things there. You got to get yourself a good keyboard. You can synthesize all sorts of sounds. Yeah. Next, no more than 120 trumpets or horns. And by the way, those are the loudest ones. So that would be the one that would most affect this situation. What about synthetic music? God willing, we'll rebuild the temple tomorrow. We'll start with the Levites. Play the keyboard. Would a keyboard qualify? Piano? Concert grand piano is a wonderful thing. That's like what? So no, you can't use wooden instruments. Period. You could use wooden temple.
There's one tree in the temple that is wood, and it is an instrument, but there's no other way to make it.
Yeah. Do you need wood?
Could you add?
So what about keyboard?
Instrument? Probably not.
Would they have microphones and amplifiers, etc., speakers in the temple? Good questions. I think a Sanhedrin would say that perhaps it's more proper. I don't know. What other instruments? What other class of instruments is relatively new that they couldn't have thought about that perhaps they should have had in the temple now? What else? Who else music? No. Okay, they're talking about just being a DJ. No, they don't want that. The point is, even a cello. Well.
And there's the one where you move your hands inside the space and it creates the sounds.
Okay, well, that's synthetic entirely.
Yeah.
Tell me about, is there anything actual natural sounds that you could do? Tambourines is just a type of toph. I don't know. I guess I could say, well.
Harmonica?
I mean,
it's like a flute. That would fall into the category of one's chalilim, I think. Somewhere in there. Next. Bagpipes. Remember the bagpipes? Bagpipes are mentioned in the Mishnah a few times. Ram talks about the bagpipes or the accordion. Okay? How does an accordion make noise? I'm not even sure. But the bagpipes is also some sort of, whatever it is. Let's go on. They had what?
I think it's a membrane that you affect.
The way this air, where it comes out of all the other pipes. You blow in one and, to refill it and yeah.
Well, that's
yeah.
I mean,
and
push out
the keys
alter
the pitch of the sound that's coming out.
Yeah, I don't know exactly how. Probably.
Okay. So we'll see what they do when they make the temple. But notice there's one sealed sol, one symbol. Okay. All these other things, you have multiple of them. The symbol is but one. So you have many horns, and 120 horns, one symbol. Okay. The emphasis here is, until now, the chatzot are blown by who? Some Leviim and some Israelites. On the Moadot, that means any day that's not just a weekday, and on the Chodashim. Okay, sorry, not Shabbos necessarily. It says Yom Simchaschem V'Odechem V'Roshei Chodshechem. Happy days, Moadim, and Rosh Chodesh. The Kohanim actually have to sound the trumpets or the horns. Tokim b'chatzosot b'shara korban v'alim omrin shira. So they sound the trumpets and the Levim sing the song. Why? Why on this day is the Kohanim? Because we saw before, the sound when the Kohanim do it, it's considered a temple service. It's a zikaron lifnei Hashem, azkarata Hashem. The maskeret is the aspect that which is being offered is accepted by God. It's like another form of reach nicholach. If you want their details in this kuntrus I put out, giving all the examples here. Okay, this copy is not for sale. It's already been purchased by one. By the way, get your copy of Halu B'Tikah Shofar. Contact me for shipping and details. It's the sequel to the Haggadah Pesach. So you have here, that's what I did about Halu B'Tika Shofar. So you have here examples of what it means. Good question we saw today. Yom Zichron Trua Yelechem. So Chazal said Zichron Trua is a remez to what? The Zichron Trua on Rosh Hashanah is a reference to one day the sages will outlaw sounding the shofar on Shabbos. And Shabbos is just supposed to be a Zichron. When Rosh Hashanah is on Shabbos, don't sound the shofar. It's a Zichron Trua, memory of a Trua. Wait a minute. But it's called Zichron Trua in Vayikra. How are we to fulfill this aspect of Zichron Trua? Trua is mentioned in Bamidbar, Yom Trua Yelechem. What is Zichron Trua every other year? Most years, Rosh Hashanah is not Shabbos. And even before Chazal made this rule, they were sounding the shofar on Shabbos. So all those years, and even the years now, when we sound the shofar on Rosh Hashanah, how are we to Mikayim, as they say? How do we fulfill this aspect of Zichron Trua? If Zichron is, a remez, that you will not sound the shofar on Shabbos, the answer is, the sounding of the shofar is as though it's accepted like a korban. Like we said last week. Sounding the shofar is like a korban, so it has to be accepted. So that's why here, on these special days, when there's a specific commandment to sound the Chatzotzrot, as we read in Parshat Ba'alotcha, this is given specifically to the Kohanim. The Kohanim are the ones who offer the sacrifice, which is a Zikro Lifnei Hashem. So too, the sounding of the trumpets on these days specifically, most days of the week, right? Most weeks, the trumpets are just another instrument that are used in the temple, like the flutes and the harps, etc. Now the Kohanim do it. And it says, of Yom Simchas and Modechem, I quoted this pasuk. That's when you have to sound the shofar. Achatzotzerot, hi. So Makbili has chatzotzeret, right? I have plural. What does Machon Mamre have? I'm sorry I didn't scroll down. Chatzotzerot haita. See, it's kind of strange. They use a plural, and then it says the verb is singular. So you can understand why Makbili corrected it to singular. Okay. Na'aseh min ha'eshet shel kesef. What's an eshet? It means one big clump of silver. Just like the menorah was built, one big piece of gold hammered out. Hold on one second. So too, that's they made one of these chatzotzrot. Is that a difficult thing to do? I don't know. I never made an instrument like this. It should be hollowing the thing should be the hardest part, you know. If it's one piece.
Why hollow?
To make a trumpet, I know that to have a horn, you have to have air going.
No, I was thinking like you
bend it over.
No, you like smash it and then fold.
Okay, a little bit hard. I don't know. I'm not just like I'm not a gemologist, so I can't know how to make the choshen mishpat. I also don't. I'm not a metal worker. I'm not a silversmith, so I don't know how they would go about doing this. There's this local silversmith. Maybe I could ask him how that goes. The same guy who gave me the silver to give Machatzis a shekel, just like raw silver. He has a workshop here. He makes all sorts of amazing things. Maybe he knows. Okay. Asao tamina grutaot shel kesef. Grutaot is pieces. Like the guy has. What has he make silver? It's quite interesting. He has this jar of just silver pieces. Looks like droplets of silver, all different random shapes, and he melts them down in order to form jewelry and stuff. So that's what they're talking about here. Melting these all together to make, the instruments. Kshera mishar minuyatachop psula. If let's say they're making, like I said, brass or gold even, they're to make the trumpet out of some other material that's not kesef. No, they first have to make it one solid piece, and then they make the instrument. These flutes they're using, the abuv, that is the reed, that's the mouthpiece. That was made out of a reed. Okay, it's called a reed. And by the way, kaneh is a reed. Okay, the reed that grows at the edge of wet places. The kanim, kaneh suv. So that's why the abuv even nowadays is called what? Even if the reed is made out of plastic, it used to be they made proper instruments. The reed was made out of what? A reed that they actually took from the water. Yeah. Mipnei shekolo arev. Even though yes, you want a nice, whatever, golden flute, you still have to make sure the reed is wood. In this case, this is basically woody material. So the reed is, because that makes a better sound. Okay. They, in this case, l'chalek means play this instrument. They use a single one. Mipnei shu michalek yafeh. You do it right, it has this right effect. Single flute. By the way, I've heard that a flute solo. Okay, there's a guy. I don't know. There are people who know how to mix music very well, and sometimes you could do a solo of a single instrument, and it's so sublime, especially when you start. Like, how many songs start with just like Karl Bach used to start some songs whistling. How does Stairway start? Well, yeah, single instruments, like very, and then it just goes into. Sorry to bring into this thing. If I don't know what the words of Stairway to Heaven are about, but that's considered like fine music, classical rock music. They bring in all sorts of instruments, and I think they sometimes compose with a whole orchestra. But sometimes you have the single flute. Okay, so there's a lot of things. Also, I think that other classic works utilize this single flute sound at the beginning or for dramatic effect. The flute in the silence. Okay. Oh, sort of regret now not studying enough music, but you could always study music. It's a great thing. Study math, study music. That's the way of the smartest people know math and music, right? The biggest geniuses know math and music. One or the other, right? Usually, it's the same part of the brain. 12 days a year, the Khalil is hitting on the Mizbeach. What is Makel? That's an expression from the Mishnah. What does it mean? 12 days a year, the flute is actually hitting before the Mizbeach. What does that expression mean? Even translating to English is wrong because I'm translating literally. Makel Lifnei Mizbeach in the Mishnah means, what does it mean? It means that instead of playing the instruments when they start pouring the wine, the libation means as the korban itself is being offered. How do you bring a korban? Well, they slaughter the animal, they apply the blood, they catch the blood, they apply the blood. Then they have to dissect the animal. They have to open up and take out the entrails, skin the animal, cut off the different limbs and all that, and bring it onto the altar. And then they bring the libation. So what they're telling us here is, no, you begin with the music. The music starts the whole process. When Bishchitat Pesach Rishon. By the way, there is no Nesech with Pesach Rishon. When Pesach Rishon is offered, Korban Pesach, everybody brings their goats to the temple. There is no meal offering. There is no libation. So Levim are just singing Hallel the entire time. The Kohanim are slaughtering. What? Yeah, you get through 3. That's what the Mishnah says. And there's 3 groups, at least 50 people, bring their Korban Pesach. So it's a whole process. But the point is, the Levim are singing. By the way, what's the shir of Pesach? Just like the Monday morning sacrifice has Psalm 48, so too, what psalm is the psalm for offering Korban Pesach? It's known as the Egyptian Hallel. It's a series of psalms. It starts with Halu Avdei Hashem, remember? So, no, Hallel HaGadol is one chapter. It's the Hodus. Everything ends in the Hodu Hashem, Kilam Chasto. That's Hallel HaGadol. The Hallel, the shir of Pesach, of offering Korban Pesach in the afternoon of the 14th, is what you and I know as the Egyptian Hallel, a series of these things. By the way, and in the Haggadah we brought that it's mashma. Wait a minute, Korban Pesach has no mincha and no libation. What's up with that? And the answer is because the service of Korban Pesach is suspended. You offer it on the 14th, but you only eat it on the night of the 15th. And when you eat on the night of the 15th, it's like, once again, everybody eating Korban Pesach is a Kohen. Even a servant woman. She's born Gentile. She's thrust into service for a Jewish family. So she's the lowest rung on the socioeconomic ladder. She's just as obligated as a Jewish man to bring Korban Pesach. And she sits at the table and she leans. She doesn't have her husband there. She's leaning in like everybody else. She has to drink the 4 cups and eat Korban Pesach like everybody else. Right? So where's the libation and the mincha for Korban Pesach? The matzah and the 4 cups. Yeah. Uvishchitat Pesach Sheni, and when they offer the second Pesach, if there was a Korban Pesach Rishon and it was done B'Tara, so the people had been disqualified for whatever reason, they get a second chance. That's when they sing it also, and they play the Chalil. The Yom Tov Rishon Shah Atzeret. Yom Tov Rishon, very interesting. What's Rambam applying there? Atzeret is a one-day holiday in the temple. What does he mean Yom Tov Rishon? The answer, because they continued with, there was Tashlumin, a whole week of time to offer the Chagiga and the Re'iyah, etc. Okay? Uvishmonat Yemei Chag, and the 8 days of the festival. The Chag is usually a reference to Sukkot. Okay? V'chalil zeh doche Shabbat. The playing of this instrument, doche Shabbos. Wait, everything in the temple is doche Shabbos. No, because there's some musical things are not necessarily obligated by the Torah, and in that case, the sages didn't ordain it. In this case, the sages, or this is something they knew they have to do. For example, the Simchas Beis HaShoeva instrumental, that's not Doche Shabbos or Yontif, which is kind of weird. You know why? Because when they did the Simchas Beis HaShoeva in temple times in Sukkot, they did it the nights of Chol Moed, which were not Shabbos. So the first night they couldn't because Yontif. You're not supposed to have music and singing and dancing, which is not part of the actual temple service. And the 8th night, Shmi Atzeres, also that's a Yontif. They don't do this. And if there's a Shabbos Chol Moed night, they also don't do Simchas Beis HaShoeva. Which means that which we do, the common practice. Rav Tzuriel writes about this also. Baruch Shekivanti. I was telling you when they built the synagogue across the way, they dedicated this building. That first Simchas Torah, I went to a local dayan. I said, something doesn't feel right. The way they do Simchas Torah in most places, like a big get down, is certainly against that explicit Gemara in Beitza. Tosfos says, okay, the way we dance now, it's mutter because we're not going to come to a fixed place here. Mashma for the Rambam, he doesn't hold of that. And Rav Tzuriel wrote this. You read, the way the Gra and the Rambam learn this. That which is done on Simchas Torah is perhaps not right. When they rebuild the temple, very interestingly enough, I think people come to realize this. We're going to do Simchas Beis HaShoeva, but comes the night of Simchas Torah, Shmini Atzeres, the temple is like, you can't do all that which you do on Simchas Beis HaShoeva. It's Yontif. So I've seen real Litvish rabbi types on Simchas Torah. They do. Yeah, the Gra himself used to get down on Simchas Torah. Tzuriel's answer is that when the Gra did Simchas Torah, it was already Yontif Sheni. It was only the Rabbanon. And the Gra didn't do like we do. It meant that the Gra was going like this a lot. But he didn't like jump off the ground. He wasn't clapping, it says. He was doing literally, what's a hakafa? A procession. It doesn't mean you have to do like we do when, let's say, the first guy in the Chever gets married. Like he's always, why is it the most wild wedding when the first guy gets married? Because all his friends are still unmarried. They still have a lot of energy. The last guy in the Chever to get married, his friends come to the wedding. They're already married. They might even have kids already. You dance a lot less once it's like you're tired. You have a job. So when it's the younger you get married, the more Levitic the wedding's going to be. So it's a difference between one of those weddings and one. Yeah. So Leon, looking at you, the guy, whoever Zoche, the first guy to get married. Oh, we already know who's getting married first. David, he was here before. So he's the first guy to be getting married. God bless him. So that's going to be the most Levitic wedding. And whoever is unfortunate enough, don't be the last one, but whatever. We'll try to make it Levitic. We'll bring in younger guys. So that is technically not allowed, and we'll see this soon when we rededicate the temple. We'll be very happy. I was at the rededication of the Churva when they first rebuilt it. That was the happiest occasion I've ever been at. It was so Jewish there. It was so happy. I would imagine that's a taste of the rebuilding of the actual temple. So when they rebuild it, we'll see what it's like, and we'll realize that which most people do on Simchas Torah really should be do that during Chol Moed at the Simchas Beis HaShoeva. The night of Simchas Torah already, which is a Yontif, do like Chazal did and take a break.
We would like to encourage our viewers to share these videos with friends and send in your responses. If you would like to obtain Birkon Nusach Eretz Yisrael or invite the rabbi for a speaking engagement, please email us at office@machonshilo.org.